All right, good day, friends. Welcome to another monthly episode of Calmly Considered here on Faith Seeking Understanding. I am Allan. I am a pastor, retired. I'm a professor, a Bible moth, a theologian in exile, and a peddler of hope. And I am also the self-appointed Anselm of Canterbury Chair of Podcast Theology and Culture at Faith Seeking Understanding University, where all seekers are welcome to ponder profound things free of charge. And my conversation partner, as always, for Calmly Considered, is the incomparable, and he has the fingerprints to prove it, Michael Cruz, who is the Grand Poobah Chair of Economics and Public Theology here at Faith Seeking Understanding University. So, hey, Michael, so we got some sports to talk about first before we get into the subject. And our Grand Poobahs, we don't have a schedule, so we don't have any losses, but lots of sports to talk about. So, the NFL, which I have sworn off for various reasons. I now call it the MFL, the Massage Football League, but no, that's just my decision, and I don't expect people to follow my lead. But I got to confess, I did watch the Panthers Browns game Sunday because I just wanted to see, I just wanted to see it. But anyway, hey, your Chiefs have done well first game.
They did. Everybody was freaking out here when they lost Tyreek Hill earlier in the year.
Yeah.
That was going to be all sorts of terribleness, but I think they showed that they can regroup, and Tyreek Hill wasn't the essential piece to it. So, they did pretty well. They've got high hopes for this game. Thursday is going to be the big one. We'll see what happens when they meet a really good
By the way, I
opponent.
got to tell you something. You're going to get a kick out of this.
Yeah.
So scrolling down social media Sunday, or maybe it was Monday, scrolling down social media, and there was somebody talking about the Chiefs, and some guy who was dissing Patrick Mahomes and said, "Here you go. You ready?" He said, "If you take away his throwing arm, he's just a mediocre quarterback." And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, if you've got to resort to that kind of an argument, you should talk to you. Of course, exactly. If you take away his arm, he's a mediocre quarterback.
Right, exactly. Well, and even with a lessened arm, his IQ plays and scrambling and ability, he's a full package. It's
who
pretty
he reminds
amazing.
me of in that respect, for those of us who go back a while, is in the 80s, Bernie Kosar, who played for the Browns, who did not have the athletic ability that Mahomes has, but was really smart and could read defenses and was able to pick apart plays that seemingly were broken. And that's how Mahomes reminds me of that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And it makes it fun to watch. It's exciting. So.
It is exciting. Yeah. So my Guardians, man, I'm loving my Guardians.
Yeah. They're surging.
I'm kind of looking forward, hopefully, to an October. Again, I don't think they can go over the long haul, but gosh, I'm looking for some exciting baseball in October. They're hanging in there okay. Yeah.
Well, the Royals aren't doing much to help you. They couldn't beat the Twins last night.
I know. I want to send them an email and say, hey, you guys know Michael Cruz. We're friends. What do you guys do?
That's right.
Beat the Twins, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's
what they broke up a combined no-hitter that the Twins were throwing in the ninth inning last night. And so I was celebrating on Facebook the fact that they broke up their no-hitter, and says and fellow Royals fan says it's pretty sad when we're celebrating the thing that the Royals were able to do is they were able to break up a no-hitter.
Yeah, I said, hey, I used to say that years ago with the Browns. And what you said years ago with the Browns, well, they lost, but at least they didn't throw any interceptions.
Yes. Well, and I said, well, I'm kind of a glass 1/8 full guy. That's kind of mine. It's
I hear that. Yeah.
So
anyway. Let's get into the subject at hand. And the subject is student loan forgiveness, thinking Christianly. And I need to give you credit for that phrase, thinking Christianly. It's a great phrase you sent to me in a message. I don't know if Christianly is a word, but I'm going to start using it.
I use it in contrast to thinking biblically.
I like that. I like
that's my,
Um,
that's the
now,
reason for
I have
the
to
word.
say, and this is another topic for another time. I don't want to get rid of the word biblically, but I do think it's
Right.
greatly misused.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so thinking Christianly is a good way to say it. And one of my concerns, and I know it's yours, that when the whole student loan forgiveness thing came up, and this is nothing new, but when it came up, just the social media commentary from both sides of this issue from
Yes.
Christians was just depressing.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
is.
and I just grieve what I call the biblical illiteracy among Christians who read the Bible. I mean,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
they read the Bible, they know the Bible, but it just blows my mind. Anyway, we're going to get into that, but
Yeah.
so we're going to try and think Christianly about this. So, Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about? Oh, first of all, let me say this. It's not clear the president can forgive student loans, is it?
That's right.
I mean, in fact,
Right.
it's probably not the case. Nancy Pelosi came out the next day or later that day after Joe Biden announced it, saying, Congress has got some say here.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I attribute the executive order misuse over the last couple of decades to the incompetence of Congress and their refusal to
Right.
do what Congress is supposed to do. But that's another issue. So it isn't clear that the president can do this, but okay, let's just make the assumption for a moment that he can.
Right.
So give us, in a nutshell, what you understand this whole student loan forgiveness program to entail.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's in some ways it's pretty straightforward. The idea is that the people that have taken student loans guaranteed by the government they'll get $10,000 of their debt canceled. For people that went through the Pell program, it can be up to 20,000 canceled. And I think you have to have an annual income of $125,000 or less in order to be eligible for that debt cancellation. My understanding is there's about $1.75 trillion in student loan debt in the country, and this would be somewhere in the range of $300 billion, give or take $100 billion, depending on who you read and what you talk about, in terms of the overall impact in the economy. Disproportionately would aid those that are towards the lower end of the economic spectrum. In fact, one of the things that I remember reading sometime back was that it's actually the people who have the most debt tend to be the ones who have the least trouble paying it off, partly because those that took the most debt did it because they went to things like to become doctors, to business school, that kind of thing. So they're making jobs where they make good money and they can pay off those debts. A lot of debt is people who started college, went a year or two, maybe 3, and then didn't finish their program and are now working a job that doesn't require college education, doesn't pay as well, but they still got that student debt on their slate, and find it difficult to get it paid off. There are a lot of people like that. There are also a lot of for-profit schools, for-profit colleges, and so on that probably engaged in shady practices in order to try to recruit students and get them into taking debt that was either not necessary or exorbitant prices, that type of thing. And so there's a lot of people that didn't finish those programs as well that ended up with debt that they have to service. So I think it's towards, and it also tends to be true that African Americans and Mexicans tend to take out loans at a higher rate. I mean, I would say a greater percentage of them when they go to college, greater percentage of African Americans when they go to college take out loans than do white people when they take out loans. Same true with Mexican Americans. So the idea is that you're going with people because it's Pell Grants. You're talking about people, I don't say slightly, it's modestly oriented towards people that are towards the bottom end of the income spectrum and modestly oriented towards people that are not white in terms of the people it has the impact for. Not radically so, but it is skewed slightly that direction. I think there's a couple reason, well, three reasons at least. One may be a very legitimate justice question about the whole student loan program itself. I have issues with how the student loan program has operated over the years. In some ways, I think it has simultaneously made itself too available to too many people, which has ballooned the price of college. The more money there is chasing college tuition, the more colleges are going to raise their prices if you make it more available. Should have been probably better targeted towards those that are lower income, and so it creates warped incentives in terms of people borrowing money, and then the whole thing just begins to feed on itself. There's that issue. So there's one issue was that issue with the student loans. The second issue that I think of is also the political issue, which is that among progressive Americans, this idea of student loans has become a big cause that they've been promoting. And so this is a way for the president and the Democrats to give something to the base that they're excited about and want to see happen. So there's the political side of it. And I think also there is possibly a stimulus justice component to this idea that whites have had all sorts of benefits going back to the GI Bill and so on that disproportionately benefited them over the years, and I can name other things as well. And this sort of helps balance the table in the other direction in terms of trying to give some aid and help to those that were not able to receive that kind of aid. So it kind of helps balance that as well. I see sort of those to me seem to be three streams that are feeding into the motivation behind wanting to have this bill. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, so one question for you real quickly. One of the concerns expressed by Republicans when this came out was it's going to increase inflation. Will it?
Who knows, really? But
fair enough. I tell you what, I think I'm going to vote for you if you run for office, because I would love to vote for a politician who does not always have the answers.
Yeah, right. I mean, I read a story by Goldman Sachs when this stuff first came out that basically said that this was basically going to be a wash.
I think I read that too. Yeah,
it wasn't going to cause inflation. It wasn't going to have much impact on inflation at all. Basically, their point, up or down. And there were reasons why they go through the analysis of what the impact is if you forgive debts, then what do people do with that money? How does it get spent? How does it get used? And so, it creates inflationary aspects in some regards, but it also is disinflationary in other regards. And by the time you weigh it all out, it's murky as to what impact will have. But the analyses that I have read suggest that if it has an impact, it'll be a minimal one. But yeah.
All right. I just was curious. I always chuckle when someone says, after Biden did this and Republicans came out and said, "Oh, this is just a political act." It's like, really? Yeah. Gee, tell me something new. Politicians always act politically. Now, whether it's good or not is another issue. But the point is, Lindsey Graham has announced proposing a 15-week abortion ban, federal abortion ban. Well, he's trying to get Republicans out to the polls. I mean, it's like, okay, it might be a good idea, it might be a bad idea, but let's get rid of this shock and scandal that a politician would just submit something for political reasons. So it just cracks.
Exactly. But I should say too, on the political front, one of the things I find interesting about the student loan thing is that, of course, Republicans have all been opposed to that. I think there's almost universal dislike of it. The progressive side, sort of the Bernie wing of the Democrats, have been wanting total debt cancellation. I mean, you want to get rid of everything. And so Biden is trying to find a sweet spot between those two things and to target it, which I think makes it more easier to swallow for some of those people who may have just modest objections. They see it's targeted. Maybe that's not quite so objectionable if it does that. I mean, for whatever weaknesses Biden has, he does have a pretty good nose for trying to find things that'll get a majority support.
And I think, by the way, just to say, and Biden, I can't say that I'm a huge fan of some of the things President Biden has done, but I think he was always, if I understand him and his work in Senate, that he was kind of the bridge builder in a lot of things. things,
It's a deal maker. Yeah.
which is what moderates do. And I do know that, Republicans paint him as a liberal. I mean, it's the job of every party to paint the other candidate as the extremist, but he really has not been. I mean, he has been, and I think that he understands that.
Right.
So just a thought from this guy who voted for President Biden, but has not been entirely happy about his presidency. Okay.
Yeah.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can live with that. So, let me ask one other comment on this, and then we're going to move on to thinking Christianly.
Yeah.
When I paid off my student loans years ago, and I had a fair chunk of them, and I finally paid them off in the year 2000. I vividly remember that last payment, Michael.
Right.
It was a different situation. My children, my 4 grown children, who have some student loans and who are faithfully paying them off, who are hard workers, all of them are hard workers. My 2 daughters who are married, their husbands are hard workers. They're hard workers. But they've got a different situation today. And I have told my kids, I've told them, I said, you need to start working toward and saving toward retirement. Right now, they're all in their 20s, early 30s. I said, because you don't have, I had with the United Methodist Church, I had a great pension program. Couple that with my wife, who can get a dime out of a nickel. Thank God that she did the finances over the years, because if it had been me, it'd have been hopeless.
Yeah.
But because of that, I got to retire at the age of 60.
Right.
Okay. So what I want to say to some people is the situation for my children's generation and my grandchildren's generation, we'll see how that comes about, is not like it was.
Right.
Right. And so it's a different situation. It's not completely the same. And I paid off my student loans. I paid them all off. But I have concerns about my children in what's available to them as far as livelihood. And as far as, so anyway, let me stop there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things to think going forward from this point, and I could build you a case that the student loan program, the incentives that it creates are warped, that it's not a well designed. I think that probably might be my biggest criticism of this whole student loan debate so far. Okay, so we're going to forgive loans, 10,000 for this, 20,000 for that, $825,000. What are you going to do to change the incentives that are in the loan program? Nothing is addressing that. And so, so we can make some good arguments for why this thing needs to be done now, but 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road, we're going to be right back here again, unless you start doing something to change the incentives that are in the student loan program and the way the thing is set up. So that to be probably my biggest criticism is not what's in the bill, it's what's not in the bill is I think the problem. I guess I'd say bill, the executive order, he wants to do this as president. So I think that would be the issue. But adding to your story, what you're saying, this is talking about affecting at least 20 million people. I think they think that this could impact. And a number of these people are people that took out loans for college that never made it to college and are now sacked with that debt. To have those people released from the debt that they're in and be able to apply that money towards, like you said, retirement, bettering the lives of their children, doing that as opposed to what happened in terms of predatory lending or other things that happened to them in the course of their earlier life. That seems to me to be making a more productive economy, a more prosperous economy, a more just economy. So along those lines, I think it's a good thing. I will say, and I think some of the progressive people that I heard on social media said, I think do dismiss too quickly, though, the issue that I paid off my loans and they're getting theirs free, the sense of injustice about that, and to vilify people for having a sense of injustice about the fact that they worked hard to pay off their loans. There are a lot of people out there who didn't go to college and don't have that debt and now people who did go to college and incurred that debt are now getting it paid off, and they're going to be in better situations than the person who responsibly acted by not taking out the loan. Yeah, I mean, you should feel a little bit of injustice about that. And my point would be that there's no perfect solution to all of this. There are some things, but to just say that somebody has those feelings of frustration or a bit of injustice about some of that, that's not thoroughly 100% misplaced in my estimation. So I think it's important to have some balance. But yes, I think you're right. The amount that college costs has become exorbitant, and a big part of what has increased the cost of college has been the whole student loan program. It's incentivized that. So we've got to figure out some way to fix the student loan program. And in the short term, something like Biden's proposal may be a way for the very short-term situation for people right now, but we're going to have millions of people in the same boat very soon if we don't fix it.
Yeah, I have a nephew who forgone, forgoed, whatever word.
Yeah.
Going to college because he didn't want the student loans. So I mean, I get that. But
Yeah.
that's a great segue into the next segment. The main segment is, Michael, let's think Christianly about this whole thing. And I'm going to turn that over to you to begin the conversation. And so let's see what's going on.
Well, I actually would be interested. I'm more interested in kind of hearing what you say. You're the one who's got the expertise in scripture and church history and those types of things. I guess a couple of things, and the things that I observe, and I'll let then you see what you say, see if you agree or not, and what you think. Debt is talked about a lot in the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. It's there, but it strikes me that a primitive agricultural society or an even advanced agrarian society of the past is not the society of modern industrialism and post-industrialism America of the West or the global environment today. And that debt served a different purpose in the past than it does today. It was understood differently. And so drawing a straight line from something like Jubilee to we should forgive student loan debts strikes me as extremely contrived. But that doesn't mean that Jubilee is irrelevant to inform our thinking about what should happen with debt and justice. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about how?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I have said that what these texts do is help Christians have a posture toward thinking about these things. There's no straight line. You and I both have, you mentioned this, and I mean, Christians on both sides of this issue, I mean, it's just been depressing to see what they post in the memes they post. And, I saw one that just where the older son in the prodigal son parable is upset because he got his PP loans forgiven, and it's like, stop it. Just stop this, and so I don't think these texts are irrelevant. I think they help us develop a posture, but you're right to say it is not a straight line. And one of my frustrations is that political conservative Christians, I'm talking Christians now, political conservatives and liberals do this. They both do it.
Yes, they do.
And they point to straight lines so it becomes obvious as to what should happen or what should be done. And no, this is not the case. I think Jubilee matters. I wrote a post on that. Just again, to put this in context, debt is important. Debt and debt forgiveness and all of this with Jubilee. There's a reason why God instituted this. This is important for us to think about. But it doesn't draw a straight line to student loan forgiveness, but it helps us think about it. And debt is not, again, the economics of the ancient world, which you know more about than I, is much different and more simple. Gosh, I would love to have that. Anyway, there's a difference and more simple than it is now. It's much more complex. We've got a global economy. And that just raises all kinds of interesting conundrums. So I think scripture helps us think about this, but I think we need to be careful about drawing those clear straight lines because it just isn't there.
In what way would you see Jubilee informing this discussion that we're having about student
Okay,
debt?
so I think one of the purposes of Jubilee in the Old Testament is God understanding that over time wealth becomes imbalanced, and that
Right.
you have wealth in the hands of the few for various reasons as opposed to the majority, and that Jubilee is a way of equalizing things.
Right.
And it is also a way of saying to those who have more wealth or more means, you're not allowed to do whatever you want with this. You are not allowed to exploit people. You are not allowed to take advantage of people. So what I would say is that, and by the way, I'm going to appeal to Adam Smith, right? The Wealthy Nations, who says the task of those who generate wealth is the task of those who have the wealth and generate it is to make sure that those who are working and laborers who help generate the wealth are taken care of and
Right.
who are paid a fair wage, right?
Yeah.
And so
Right.
what I would say that what Jubilee does for us, and I'm not a supporter of instituting Jubilee in America. I don't think that's
Right.
possible.
Yeah.
I think it helps me as a Christian think about the lure of wealth and
Right.
how wealth can be used as a way to discriminate against people and to line the pockets of those who have more. And so Jubilee says, no, it's not. No. Let me say it this way. You remember you remember years ago, who was it? Michael, I can't think of the actor in Wall Street, the movie.
Oh yeah. Douglas. Yeah.
Yeah, where he says, he gets up and he says, greed is good. Remember that?
Yeah. Right.
That line,
Yep.
greed is good. And the Bible says, no,
Right.
it's not good. And if you're a person who is blessed to have the means to generate wealth, to generate jobs and all of that, that's great.
Right.
Make sure you do this justly. And you
Right.
do this with a sense of compassion before those who assist you in this. So that's what I would say.
Okay, it's interesting. One of I think it was William Webb book I read years ago, who talked about a ladder. He calls it a ladder of abstraction. Basically, what he's talking about is in terms of when we look back at what happened in biblical times, and you can look at sort of the 50,000 foot view, the 10,000 foot view, and then what happens on the ground. So we talk about love your neighbor as yourself. There's a very top high level sense of ethics. You come a little bit further down, there should be no poor among you. And then you get down to the bottom level and you shall leave the edges of your field to be gleaned by the people that are poor. Well, you take that and you pull that into a 21st century American context. Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. There should be no poor among you. Okay. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to leave the edges of the field to be gleaned by the poor. Well, it obviously doesn't make any sense. So the idea is climbing back up that ladder of abstraction to the principles that applied in the Old and New Testament and bringing those forward today. And what would that look like today seems to me to be one of the pieces that I would look at. And I don't see if you agree with this or not, but one of the things from an economic standpoint that strikes me about the Jubilee is that the two things that it talks about rectifying are the ownership of the crops. So you lose the crops, they go to the person that you're indebted to, and you lose control of your labor. You become the servant of labor. With the Jubilee and the debt cancellation, you regain the ability to own your own crops and you regain the ability to use your own labor. Well, in ancient agriculture, those were the only two means of production, were labor and land. And so what to me it sort of says is that this was God's statement of everybody is supposed to be full participants in this community that God has created. It's not just about not being in debt. It's not about redistribution and everybody being equal. It's about everybody being active participants in this beloved community that God has created, where everybody is contributing to their own welfare. They're creating goods for exchange with each other to help each other out, to help the community thrive. That's one of the things that I picked up from the Jubilee, and that's a principle I think I bring forward. What are your thoughts?
No, I think that's right. So let me say to our friends who are leaning to the left on this, to say Jubilee does not promote modern socialism as we know it.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It just
Certainly
doesn't.
not. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't think in those terms.
Right.
And by the way, as a person who likes free markets, by the way, and you do too. By the way, I have
Yes, I
a
do.
United Methodist pastor friend in Ashland now, who's a young guy. He's a great guy. But every time I tell him I like free markets, he just shakes his head. So I tell him frequently.
Yeah, there you go.
As someone who likes free
They
markets,
get it in.
also you need to be careful about using scriptural text to support capitalism. Just,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's just, you got to be careful here. This is really tough. It's a different kind of thing. But I would agree with you. Let me say this. It's very clear, and I'm certainly not the first one to say this. The Bible is concerned about those on the margins. The Bible's concerned about
Yeah.
those who are vulnerable, those who have no power.
Right.
How that was dealt with in the economics of Judea in 600 BC, 700 BC, maybe indeed is indeed a different animal in 2022 America.
Right.
And it doesn't give us policy prescriptions, but it gives us, again, I'll use the word, it gives us a posture
Right.
as to how to think about this, that I, in my words and deeds and my actions and what I support and what I don't support, has to be concerned about those who are the most vulnerable in our society. Right. So that is what this needs to be about. And let me make one other comment to you, Michael, and you can feel free to push back on this. Because you said you understand that people who say I paid back my loans and I don't understand what's going on with forgiveness. I mean, that's fair enough. I get that.
Yeah.
I read Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus seems to say to me, and again, this is my extrapolation. Jesus seems to say to me, stop it, get over it.
Yeah.
When you read the parable of the prodigal son, the son who complains about, I've worked for you all my life, I've done this, I've done that, you haven't given me even so much as a goat to celebrate. Even the older brother has got an argument. He's got a good argument. And when the workers who have worked in the vineyard all day, who get paid the same as the guys that work for an hour, they've got an argument. There's something about the grace of God that goes against conventional wisdom. So I'm not going to tell Joe Smith, who paid off his loans and who struggled and sacrificed to pay off his loans, how to think about this. Right. I'm going to glean from scripture that what's being said to Allan Bevere, who paid off his loans and worked hard to pay them off and sacrificed a lot to pay them off, because when I was a young pastor, I didn't make a lot of money, and paid them off. My response to that is, okay. Yeah, that's okay. I'm good with that. I can handle that. Yeah. Yeah.
Here's the bit of wrinkle that I would put that I think shades it for me in terms of making it a more murky question. Yeah. You look in the ancient world, debt usually was incurred because a person was in crisis and need. They weren't going to have the crops to eat. So that typically is where the whole loan debt cycle began. And so the idea of charging interest on somebody who's already in need seems a bit over the top. And I think that's where the ethical consideration came from. When we come up into and usury, which was basically charging interest on anything through much of Christian history up until the 1600s. It's only after that you see thought begin to change a different direction. That was the case up until that time. But as the economy began to expand, trade began to occur, and the world became more globalized, particularly once you get to the Industrial Revolution, and suddenly you can radically increase production by owning a lot of capital and concentrating it and building a lot of things. Loans became more about borrowing money in order to invest in more productive capacity in order to create even more wealth. So that's a lot. what do you want to call it, personal loans versus commercial loans. I think that that's where a lot of the loan in the modern world came from. And to some degree, a student loan is a personal loan, but it's also a loan that you took out not because you were in need or because you're about to starve to death. It's a loan that you took out because you wanted to improve yourself in order to have better economic opportunities, to become, more full person, whatever reasons. You decided it to advance yourself, not because you were in need. And the student loan payment program, for instance, the story in the parable where the guy says, well, I'll pay this guy this much, another one this much, and then they get upset. That is the owner with his money deciding what he will do with his money. When it's a student loan situation and somebody's paying off that student loan, I'm the one indirectly paying off the student loan because I'm the one paying the taxes for that person. So not only did I pay off my student loan, but now I'm also going to pay more taxes to help pay off somebody else's student loan. And that may be a legitimate thing, but I'm just saying that I think that that's one way where it gets a little more murky in terms of not being feeling injustice at the fact that somebody else's loan has been paid off. What do you think about that? Is that a fair?
Well, I think your points are well taken. I'm wondering, just a thought here for you to respond to.
Yeah.
And that is, if I decide that God has called me to major in psychology. I actually was at one point in college a psychology major, and I took a few courses and decided that was crazy. There's no patient that needs me as a psychologist.
Would have been even crazier.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that I couldn't be a psychologist because my typical response would be, life is tough all over. That'll be $100. Anyway. So thank God, God kept me away from it. But if I decide I want to major in psychology, if God's called me to that field,
right,
I'm probably gonna have to take out student loans.
Right.
Is
Yeah,
that a luxury?
Well, it depends on how you do. I guess the question is how you determine what's God's will is. Seems to me that if God is going to call you a certain direction, then there's also the idea that if there are obstacles to getting there, that either you have to find a way through the obstacles, or maybe this isn't God's will.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I mean, you raise important points, and I get all of this. By the way, one of the things we're struggling with here, let me just say this, is we're looking at the scripture and talking about a Christian posture.
Right.
But we're talking about an issue that has been raised from what I'm going to call a secular government. And I know that there are people who disagree with the idea of America being a secular government, but it is.
Right.
And so I'm trying, so I, as a Christian, I might have more to say if I'm dealing with a large church. And there are churches that do this, who provide loans for people for this, that, or the other.
Right.
So there's kind of a, it's not a bridge. It's not a direct line.
Right.
It also creates some issues for how we think about this. And I think that's fair. I mean, I don't want to say to the person.
Right.
And I've said about me that this whole issue does not bother me.
Right.
In reference to my student loans. Okay.
Right.
But for this person who says, I worked my tail off and I did without in order to pay those off, this really irritates me.
Right.
I don't want to tell them they're selfish and self-centered.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And my point would be, and I was doing counterpoint to yours, to just not because I'm sold on the position I was giving you, but just to say that I think it's murky.
Yeah,
there are complex issues that run against each other, and what I hear is a sort of sense of certainty by one political side or another about, this is total injustice that I paid off my loans and somebody else. Well, no, it's not. We bail people out for all sorts of reasons at various times in American history. So the idea of canceling loans for particular that's not particularly outrageous. Well, it's outrageous that somebody would take offense that somebody else's loan would pay it. Well, no, not.
So let me push at that because here's the thing: if part of the concern of the scriptures is being concerned about the poor, the vulnerable, the marginalized.
Right. Right.
There must, to me, this is me, there's
Right.
something wrong with Donald Trump being able to declare bankruptcy for 4 times, 5 times, however many times he declared bankruptcy.
Right.
And a student who is in a real mess, who cannot declare bankruptcy on his loans. I think if Amos were here today, he would be apoplectic about that. Now, am I wrong?
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. The system, as is true with almost every human system, always benefits those with the wealthy that are wealthy and have power. I mean, that's always, that's what's there. And we have to continue to speak against that.
And by the way, that's Amos's frustration. If you got the power, you got the ability, and God's saying, "Yeah, I'm done with this. You're not going to do this." And so this is my frustration because I this is where, as a pastor, if I were an active pastor in a church, and I'm retired now, so I get to say it anyway. This is unjust. This is unjust that if just as any person who is wealthy, I don't mean to just pick on Donald Trump, he's not the only one.
Right.
Any person who has to declare bankruptcy gets that bankruptcy, gets forgiveness for their loans, this, that, or the other, or whatever, restructuring. Right. Why isn't that available to the person who has hit hard times and needs to declare bankruptcy on their student loans?
Yeah. And added to that, these aren't just random people who took out random loans. These are people who took out specific kind of loans that were incentivized by the government to take out those loans. So there is a policy issue here in which the government was actively complicit in the developments that happened. And so you can argue that the government, therefore, needs to be complicit in rectifying the problem that it participated in creating. So I think that's also adds another shade of difference, other than just the idea of just sort of random generic loan forgiveness or loan cancellation. This isn't just a generic case. It's a specific case that has a specific history. So
let me ask you then a question.
Yeah.
Is incentivized loans the same thing as predatory lending?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, one of the things you could argue with even the home mortgage deduction, the whole idea is that you do mortgage, that you can get your house and deduct the mortgage. That's an incentivized way of getting people to take out mortgages to buy houses. It's incentivized. Is it necessarily bad? So I don't know that I would necessarily say that all incentive to incentivize people to take out loans for something is necessarily bad. I'm generally opposed to debt wherever you can avoid taking any kind of debt for anything, but that's just not realistic in the modern world. But I definitely am for keeping it down. But I think the student loan program incentivizes possibly people who shouldn't be going to college to take out loans to try to go to college, only to find out that they don't have the right stuff for college, or college wasn't the right thing for them to be doing in the first place, and they're still stuck with loans and no way to pay them off. That is one of the worst incentive aspects of the incentives as well. And then having for-profit institutions that were basically grifter operations, in my estimation, and then the government giving government loans for those, and then not forgiving those loans once those institutions went out of business and people are stuck to carry there's a lot of seedy work that happens inside the student loan program. I think the other problem we talked about, why is tuition so high? And I go back to what I was saying earlier. Part of it is the price is to help weed out people who aren't serious or aren't capable of really succeeding in college. Part of you have a price in order to do that. But if you keep giving people more and more money through loans and incentivize them to take those loans, then you're going to have more money chasing college credits. And if colleges know that they've got more money chasing college credits, then they can just keep jacking up the price for people to come there. And because now college is more expensive, we have to increase the amount of loans that are available, which then makes the whole cycle begins to feed on itself. Had the loan program been targeted more towards those who were in financial need, for those that need scholarships, that type of thing, I think had it been a more restrictive program that was more targeted, where people would make more responsible decisions, it may not have driven it to the point that it is now.
Right.
Of course, there's some who will argue that we shouldn't have, college should be government paid for anyway. I mean, that's one side of the equation, like it is in some
What are your
Europe,
thoughts, real quickly, what are your thoughts about student loans interest-free?
I mean, I'd have to see what the numbers are. That's not something I've ever examined. I don't have.
I know there have been those who are throwing that out there, that we should give them loans,
right,
but we should make it interest-free. And of course, if they don't finish, they still have to pay back the principal, but
right,
that we won't saddle them with this exorbitant interest. Just a thought.
Well, I mean, the Brookings Institute, I think, have one suggestion years ago that's your student loan would be contingent on your income in the future. If you take out student loans and you're making $150,000, $200,000 a year, you pay that interest. If you take out student loans and your income never reaches a point that would be expected with that, then the loan eventually over time either goes away or the government ends up having to eat the loan. And the idea is that would incentivize the government not to make loans to people who aren't going to make it in college.
Well, the problem, the other thing is with that is this. First of all, it makes some sense, and that's part of the problem. I mean, it seems to me that if we judged interest based on future employment,
right,
what we would also be saying is we think it's important to invest in these persons,
right,
who will be working in various sectors. I mean, yeah, okay. Well, I don't have a ton of opinion on this, but I thought I'd ask you that because I think, I'm a pastor. I was 38 years in the ministry, and I learned in working with people, particularly those on the margins, how to incentivize them,
right,
to change their lifestyle a little bit differently, and it was different for everybody.
right.
So how do we do that? And one size does not fit all. And maybe, by the way, government can't do that because government by its very nature is unwieldy.
Right.
But just a thought on that.
Yeah, right. I don't have a specific solution for the way forward. I've read some things that to me are intriguing. I'm not convinced that the government paid tuition for colleges. There are countries in Europe, Germany, England, I know, or United Kingdom, tried that, and what you end up finding is that through rather surreptitious ways, they end up collecting money via other routes in order to help pay for the education that almost makes it as expensive as the quote free tuition. Somehow the stuff has to get paid for. But I think the incentives of our student loan program are out of whack, and that does need to be addressed. It's not, education and financing is far away from anything I have any chops to be able to speak authoritatively about, and I haven't read a lot on the specific proposals as to how to fix it. But and I guess sort of coming to the end of this, I have my friends that are on the more conservative side of this economically. I wouldn't call them Trumplicans necessarily, but they're more conservative side of this economically, who really find fault with the Biden student loan program. Generally, I think it's okay. I would prefer something that's more targeted, that may be a little less expansive, but more targeted towards certain types of people. I could qualm about what should the upper income level be at which it applies, and there's details. The general idea I don't find problematic. I think that there's there's a reasonable solution to be had there. But as I said, my biggest problem is not what's in the bill. My biggest problem is what's not in the bill, and that's how we're going to fix this going forward. I think that's what I haven't seen.
Like, I think there's a lot of people who say it's a problem.
Yeah.
What do we do with that? I don't have any profound answers to that. Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you for this conversation. It's been good, and I continue to appreciate your wisdom. It's interesting to me that when I have conversations with folks about these and other issues, you get to they reveal, and I'm the same way. I'm not putting this on anyone else, but
right,
just kind of reveal where we default. Or we default toward, I don't know, forgiveness or responsibility. Right. I'm not saying either one is right or wrong, because both are in scripture.
Right.
But we default to one or the other. How great it would be if we can actually get together and have the conversation that might lead to something fruitful. But I guess I'm just thinking wishfully.
Right. Well, and I think the first place that those conversations have to begin, based on the conversation, just think of what we saw on social media, is for people to take a more serious reflection as to how they're using scripture to inform their conversations, rather than just finding proof text and bullet points to support.
I'm so depressed about it, Michael. I got to tell you, I'm so depressed.
Yes.
I'm so depressed. I read my conservative friends on this, my liberal friends on this, and I am just depressed.
Yes. Well, and I will say that, when it comes to social media, you're talking about somebody who's running an HVAC business, or they're typical business person, or maybe they're in school or something like that, and they make some sort of proof texting remark. Okay, that's annoying. It's one thing to have that come from somebody who maybe not so, but to hear people who have responsible positions in seminaries or in, and to have them making some of the same sort of arguments and comments, that's the part that just, why are we even having a conversation?
I always say that, and I've done this before, because sometimes I've commented on a subject of which I really don't know much about, and I'll say, I think this or I think that, but I'm ignorant on this, and the problem is, well, anyway, all right. Well, Michael Cruz, thank you so much, and we will. So anyway, we'll continue the conversation, and who are the Chiefs playing this next week?
Chargers, I think. We got Thursday. They go Thursday, and then I think they go another Thursday. 2 Thursdays back to back. I think, if I were
2 Thursdays back to back. That's kind of unheard of, isn't it?
It's kind of weird. So I'll have to check and see if I've got that right. But anyway, I've been so focused on the
Just remember, if it wasn't for Patrick Mahomes' great arm, he'd be an average quarterback.
That's right. That's right.
All right, my friend, this is Allan Bevere, and with Michael Cruz, this is Faith Seeking Understanding University. Our patron saint is Anselm of Canterbury, who said, I do not understand in order to believe, but I believe in order to understand. Friends, keep thinking.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Bye.